The first week in a new town is supposed to feel like a fresh start. That's what I kept telling myself as I wrestled boxes into my tiny apartment, as I stocked my fridge with essentials, as I reminded myself that the breakup wasn't the end of me but the beginning of something else. Still, when my laptop screen flickered and went black on the very first freelance gig I had managed to land since moving here, it felt like a cruel joke from the universe. I sat at the desk surrounded by unopened boxes, staring at the lifeless machine. My whole plan for independence, for finally standing on my own after years of building my life around someone else, seemed to hinge on this single piece of equipment. I muttered a curse, shoved the laptop into my backpack, and pulled on my jacket. Rain tapped against the window pane as though urging me to get moving. The streets smelled of wet asphalt and would smoke from chimneys. A neon sign glowed faintly ahead, flickering with the words, "Tech Repairs." The shop was squeezed between a laundromat and a pawn shop, almost invisible if not for the old radio humming inside. I pushed open the door, and the scent of solder and faint oil hit me first, oddly comforting in its own way. The place was small, cluttered shelves stacked with mismatched chargers, tangles of cords, dusty routers, and a workbench that looked like it had seen decades of repairs. A faint track of classic rock drifted from a radio perched on a shelf, guitar strings soft under the steady rhythm of the rain outside. Behind the counter, a man looked up from a circuit board. He couldn't have been older than his mid to late 20s. Brown hair a little too long, curling near his ears, and eyes that startled me. Kind but quiet, as though they'd been carrying silence for a long time. His voice matched the impression when he spoke, low and unhurried. "Evening. You caught me right before closing. What seems to be the problem?" I shifted my weight, trying not to sound as frazzled as I felt. "My laptop won't turn on. It's kind of urgent. I just moved here, and I need it for work." He nodded, brushing his hands on a rag. "Let's see what we can do. Put it up here." I slid it across the counter. He powered it on, tapped a few keys, then tilted his head. "Might be something simple. I can run a quick diagnostic." His words eased me slightly, though my pulse still hadn't settled from the rain-soaked rush over. Then he stood, walked to the door, flipped the sign to closed, and with an easy motion, locked it. The metallic click echoed too loudly in the small space. I felt it immediately, my stomach tightening, a whisper in the back of my mind reminding me that I was alone, new in town, with a stranger who had just locked the only exit. My first instinct was to excuse myself, make up some flimsy reason, and leave. The key to the door glinted on a hook by the register, and my eyes darted to it before I could stop myself. He must have noticed. His hands paused on the laptop, and then, as though reading the unease radiating from me, he leaned back against the counter. His voice came softer, more deliberate. "I lock the door at closing so walk-ins don't pile up. You don't have to stay if it makes you uncomfortable. You can take the laptop and come back tomorrow." I froze, guilt mixing with the tension. "No, it's okay. I just wasn't expecting the sound. That's all." He offered the faintest smile, not pitying, just patient. "I get it. New town, new people. You don't know me from anyone else. If it helps, I'll keep the key right here in reach." He hung it back on the hook where I could see it clearly. "And you can sit by the counter while I work, so everything's in the open." That small gesture eased something in me. He didn't crowd me, didn't try to charm away my nerves. He simply made space for them. I sank onto the worn stool by the counter, the kind with cracked vinyl, and folded my hands in my lap. "Thanks," I said, and I meant it. He gave a small nod, already focused again on the machine. Tools clicked against the workbench. The rhythm of his movements, steady, precise, was oddly calming. He murmured explanations as he worked, not in a show-off way, but as if talking out loud helped him concentrate. "So, battery's fine. Could be the board connection. Sometimes these models just need a little reset." I leaned forward a little, watching the glow of the shop light across his face, the faint furrow of his brow as he handled the machine carefully. Rain drummed harder against the awning outside, but in here, there was only the steady hum of tools, the soft classic rock on the radio, and his quiet voice. I realized my shoulders had lowered, the edge of panic smoothing out. He had given me room to breathe without making me feel foolish for being wary. "You said you just moved here?" he asked, not looking up from the board. "Yeah, a week ago." That explains the unfamiliar face. Small town. People notice. I laughed softly, nerves still tucked in my chest but loosening with each passing minute. "Guess I'm the outsider now." His lips curved faintly, almost wistful. "We've all been outsiders once." The words lingered. He didn't pry, didn't push, just let the thought hang there while the tools clicked and the laptop began to hum faintly with life again. And as I sat on that stool, watching a stranger tend to the one machine I depended on, I felt the first flicker of something I hadn't expected: hesitation, yes, but also a small, cautious hope. The shop light cast a warm halo over the counter as he worked. His hands moved with practiced ease, steady even as the rain outside battered the awning like a drum. I watched him snap a tiny panel back into place, his brow furrowing in quiet concentration. "All right," he said, glancing up at me briefly. "The problem isn't your battery after all. It's the power connection on the board. It's finicky on this model. Basically, the machine's brain isn't talking to the heart. I can reset it, clean the contacts, and we should see it spring back." I blinked, trying to follow. "So, it fainted?" He chuckled, a low, warm sound. "That's one way to put it. Yeah. Your laptop fainted." I smiled despite myself, a small spark breaking through the storm cloud that had followed me since the screen went black earlier. "Well, guess I'm not much of a computer person. I'm lucky it didn't burst into flames with me pressing random keys." "That would have been dramatic," he replied, lips quirking. "Though I'm guessing you're more resourceful than you let on. People who start over usually are." The remark made me pause. Start over. He didn't say it with judgment, just recognition. "Guilty?" I said, fiddling with the strap of my bag. "New town, new job, new everything. Feels like I jumped off a cliff and now I'm hoping the parachute works." He leaned back in his chair, resting the screwdriver on the bench. "I get that. Believe me." I tilted my head. "You do?" "Yeah." He exhaled slowly, his eyes flicking to the rain-streaked window before returning to me. "I've been waiting for someone to talk to, not just another ticket number. Been a while since I've had more than circuit boards and broken screens for company." The line landed heavier than I expected. Not in a way that felt manipulative, just honest. It was startling to realize how much it echoed my own thoughts. I glanced around the shop, letting myself really take it in. A chipped ceramic mug with faded lettering, "Best Tech Alive," sat beside a half-finished retro console build, wires splayed like veins across the workbench. Along the wall hung a cluttered collage of Polaroids, blurry photos of friends, a dog with its tongue lolling out, a barbecue with smoke curling skyward, little pieces of a life half-shared, half-hidden. "Looks like you've had better days," I said softly, gesturing toward the Polaroids. He followed my gaze, a small smile tugging at his mouth. "Yeah, those were from before. Friends drift, relationships end. The pictures stay." I hesitated, then asked, "Breakup?" His shrug was casual, but his voice wasn't. "A few months ago, we kept running in circles until it snapped. Guess some things just aren't built to last, no matter how hard you solder the pieces together." The metaphor made me smile, even as something in me softened at the quiet sadness in his tone. "Well," I said with a self-deprecating grin, "you've officially met someone worse off. Mine ended with me packing up my whole life into boxes and moving here just so I wouldn't run into him at the grocery store." He laughed, and the sound was easier this time, lighter. "Fair enough. You win." The banter warmed me, the kind that comes when two people carry bruises but choose to compare them instead of hiding them. "So here we are," he said, sliding the laptop gently toward me. "Two freshly broken hearts in a storm, pretending technology is the only thing we're trying to fix." The words stirred something I didn't want to name yet. I lowered my gaze to the machine, which was slowly booting, the faint glow of the screen like a heartbeat returning. "You weren't kidding," I murmured. Relief spread through me. Told you, he said, almost playful. Just needed a little reset. For a moment, the metaphor wasn't about the laptop at all. Silence stretched between us. Not awkward, but fragile, like we were both standing on the edge of something and waiting to see if it held. He broke it first. Tea? He asked. I blinked. What? Tea. I keep a kettle in the back. Long hours, you know. Don't worry, it's not poisoned. He added with a grin that made his eyes crease at the corners. I laughed, shaking my head. Sure, why not? As long as you're not planning to lock me in forever. Not my style, he said, disappearing briefly behind a curtain. The kettle hissed a few moments later. While he was gone, I studied the Polaroid wall again. There was something intimate about it, not curated for show, just fragments of a life lived in real time. A little messy, a little nostalgic. I wondered if anyone had once stood where I sat now, tracing those same photos, sipping tea from the same chipped mug. He returned with 2 mismatched mugs, steam curling upward. Mine was chipped at the rim but warm in my hands, grounding me. Here, he said, setting it gently on the counter. Peppermint. Best I've got. I wrapped my fingers around it, letting the heat seep into my skin. Outside, the rain hammered harder, but inside, the shop seemed to shrink into a cocoon. Soft light, warm steam, the hum of electronics, and his quiet presence across from me. It's not much, he admitted, nodding toward the cluttered room. But it's mine. Keeps me going. I sipped the tea, the minty heat clearing the last of the nerves from my chest. Honestly, it feels kind of perfect right now. His eyes met mine then, steady and searching, and I felt something shift. My guard, the wall I'd built since leaving my old life, lowered just a fraction more. The laptop hummed quietly between us, repaired but not the only thing that was being mended. The laptop was running again, a faint glow warming the screen like it had been asleep all along. I should have packed it up, thanked him, and left. That would have been the normal thing to do. But something in the room held me there. Like the rain outside had drawn a curtain across the world, and stepping back into it would mean losing this little cocoon we'd stumbled into. He must have felt it too. He leaned back against the counter, mug cradled loosely in his hands. I usually close up right about now, he said, nodding toward the dark street outside. Doors already locked. You good with that? I can unlock it if you want. I glanced at the key hanging in plain view. I wasn't trapped, not really. My chest tightened anyway. No, it's fine, I said after a beat. I know I can leave anytime. Exactly. His smile was quiet, almost grateful. He didn't move to unlock the door. Neither did I. The rain softened, but the silence in the shop was its own weather system. Steady, surrounding. He set his mug down and said, "The shop's been too quiet lately, ever since he left." I raised my eyebrows, though part of me already knew. Your ex. He nodded, fiddling with a loose screw on the counter. He left town, took half the furniture with him. At first I thought it was the stuff I missed. The couch, the TV, the coffee table. Turns out it was the noise. The everyday sound of someone else's life moving beside yours. When that's gone, he trailed off, staring at the workbench. The silence gets loud. His words settled deep. I wrapped my hands tighter around my mug. That's why I moved here, I admitted. Not the silence, exactly, but I was measuring everything by his plans. His schedule, his ambitions. My life got small so his could get bigger. One day I realized if I didn't get out, I'd vanish completely. He looked up at me then, really looked, as if the story was one he'd been waiting to hear. So you packed it up and started over? Yeah. I let out a shaky laugh. And now here I am, in a repair shop, pouring my tragic backstory to a stranger. Not a stranger, he said gently. At least not anymore. Something unspoken bridged the space between us then. When he leaned across to angle the laptop toward me, our knees brushed. Just a fleeting contact, but my breath hitched all the same. I told myself it was nothing, a clumsy accident. But when it happened again, slower this time, I didn't move away. We sat close, reviewing files and backups like it was the most natural thing in the world. His hand grazed mine when he passed me the tea, and neither of us pulled back. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was charged. "I usually put on music when I'm working late," he said after a while, reaching for his phone. "Helps the time pass." "You mind?" "Not at all." A soft playlist filled the shop. Acoustic guitars, quiet voices. The kind of songs made for nights when the world narrows to lamplight and rain. The music made the moment even more surreal. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt so present. Not planning for tomorrow. Not replaying yesterday. Just here. We talked about favorite movies. His guilty pleasure was old action flicks. Mine was moody dramas I'd pretend were profound but mostly just made me cry. He teased me for it, and I teased him back for being the type who could probably quote every explosion scene verbatim. From there, it slipped into smaller things, the kinds of rituals that keep people afloat. His was brewing peppermint tea at night. Mine was scribbling in a journal, even when I didn't know what to say. We traded habits like secrets, and everyone made the air between us warmer. The rain had stopped, but I didn't notice until I glanced at the window and saw only a blurred reflection of us. Two figures leaning in close, mugs nearly empty, eyes meeting more often than not. I could feel the shift, subtle but undeniable. I wasn't just a customer waiting for a laptop to be fixed. He wasn't just a technician working overtime. Somewhere in the hours we had chosen to stay. Chosen each other, at least for tonight. I didn't know what it would mean tomorrow. But as the music played softly around us, I let my guard down and stayed exactly where I was. The playlist had shifted to something even softer. Plucked strings, almost hesitant, like the music was as unsure as I felt. I stared at the glow of my repaired laptop, pretending to study the file names while my heart thudded too loudly in my chest. He was close. Too close for me to pretend I didn't notice. Our knees brushed again. My hand, resting on the counter, trembled just enough to give me away. He saw it. I know he did, because he set his mug down with deliberate care, turned toward me and said quietly, "I don't want to misread this. Tell me if I'm off." The honesty in his tone disarmed me. He wasn't trying to charm me into anything. He wasn't assuming. He was asking. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to meet his eyes. "You're not off," I admitted, my voice rough. "I feel drawn to you. I just don't know if I'm ready. Not after everything." His shoulders eased, though he didn't move closer. "That's fair. I feel the same pull. But if you're nervous, we go slow. We talk. We stop if either of us feels wrong about it. Deal?" Something in my chest loosened at the word deal. A choice, not pressure. Deal. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was steady. He reached across the counter, slow enough for me to decide. His fingers brushed the back of my hand, warm, patient. I didn't pull away. When he leaned in, it wasn't sudden. It was the kind of closeness you step into together, breath by breath. Our lips touched lightly at first, barely a whisper of contact, as though testing the air. The kiss was tentative, soft, almost shy. His hand lingered on mine, not gripping, just holding. I let out a shaky exhale, the sound breaking the quiet between us. "That was good," I murmured, almost surprised at my own honesty. He smiled, his forehead resting gently against mine. "Then maybe another?" I nodded before I could overthink it, and this time the kiss deepened, still gentle but sure. There was no rush, no desperation, just warmth and breath, the steady rhythm of two people finding a middle ground between fear and want. When we finally drew apart, I laughed softly, nervous and giddy all at once. "I feel like a teenager again." "So do I," he admitted. "Only this time, I know enough to ask instead of assume." We stayed close, talking quietly, our words threading between moments of silence. "I don't want to be a rebound for you," I confessed. "You're not," he said firmly. "I've had enough empty nights to know this is different. You're not filling a gap, you're here, present." I searched his face, wanting to believe it, and found no hesitation in his expression. "I don't want to be defined by what broke me, either," I admitted. I want to be seen as more than the guy who ran away. You are, he said, simple and steady. I see you. The words landed like a promise. The shop light flickered as if on cue, reminding us how late it had grown. The rain outside had stopped, leaving only the hum of the refrigerator and the faint strum of the playlist. He rose and crossed to the door, turning the lock once more. Not to trap, but to seal the night in. I keep a blanket here, he said, pulling it from a shelf near the back. For long shifts. Want it? I smiled faintly. Depends. Are you offering warmth? Or an excuse to sit closer? Both, he admitted with a laugh. We spread the blanket across the worn couch in the corner, the one piled with spare parts and unopened boxes. Sitting there, shoulder to shoulder, felt natural, as if we'd been doing it for years. Closeness became easier. Hands clasped, touches that lingered, the gentle press of lips that deepened into something more. Every time he paused, checking with a look, waiting for my nod. Consent wasn't just words. It was in the rhythm we built, the reassurance in every pause. When we leaned further into each other, the world seemed to fade. I won't put the details here. They're not what mattered most. What mattered was the way we moved carefully, the whispered questions, the steady stream of "Is this okay?" answered with quiet yes. It wasn't about lust. It was about comfort, about two people choosing not to run from connection anymore. When the intensity blurred into a soft fade, the lamp still glowed on the counter, painting the shop in amber light. We lay under the blanket, breath slow, bodies warm, the kind of closeness that didn't need to be explained. He whispered into the quiet, I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but I know I don't regret tonight. Me neither, I replied, surprising myself with how true it felt. We stayed like that, the glow of the lamp our only witness, whispering small hopes, about new beginnings, about not being alone, about letting the silence finally soften instead of roar. And in that cluttered repair shop, with rain drying on the awning and the scent of solder still lingering in the air, I realized the risk hadn't been kissing him. The risk had been letting myself stay. The first thing I noticed when I woke was the scent of coffee. Rich, dark, familiar in a way that made me momentarily forget where I was. Then came the whir of a fan, moving warm air through the cramped shop, rattling against the shelves stacked with spare parts. I shifted under the blanket, blinking at the soft gray light filtering through the blinds. The neon sign outside was dark, the street beyond hushed after the long night of rain. My laptop sat open on the counter, screen glowing faintly in standby mode, as if keeping vigil. And then him, moving quietly near the workbench, mug in hand, hair mussed, still wearing the same clothes from last night. He glanced over his shoulder when he heard me stir. His smile was small but real. Morning, he said softly. Morning. My voice was rough but not from regret. More like I hadn't spoken since whispering myself to sleep beside him. He crossed the space and offered me the steaming mug. I took it with both hands, grateful for the heat. We sat for a while in silence, sipping coffee as the town slowly woke outside. It wasn't awkward. It was tentative, like both of us were afraid of breaking whatever fragile thing we'd built overnight. Eventually, he set his mug down and cleared his throat. We should probably talk about what this is. I braced myself, but instead of panic, I felt a quiet readiness. Yeah, we should. He leaned back against the counter, folding his arms loosely. Look, I don't want to rush into anything. Labels, expectations, they can choke something before it even breathes. But I don't want to pretend last night didn't mean anything either. I nodded. Same. I don't need promises you can't keep. I just want honesty. If this is something, then let's let it grow at its own pace. No pressure. His eyes softened, relief flickering across his face. Exactly. No pretending, no games. Just intention. The words settled into me like a stone in water. Solid, steady. Before I could respond, a loud bang 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 rattled the glass door. We both startled. A middle-aged man in a windbreaker stood outside, jabbing his finger at his watch. Open yet? The man called through the glass. The tension in me spiked, but he only chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. He raised a hand politely, gesturing for the man to wait, then turned to me. Early bird. He comes by twice a week like clockwork, demanding instant fixes. Used to stress me out. And now? I asked. He shrugged, a faint grin tugging at his lips. Now I remember I get to set the pace. Care over urgency, right? He can wait. Something about the calmness in his tone impressed me more than the laptop repair had. It was a reminder that steadiness wasn't just something he offered in the quiet. It carried into conflict too. The banging subsided, and eventually the man stomped off toward the diner across the street. The shop settled back into its cocoon. He turned back to my laptop, still open on the counter. Speaking of care, I should finish this properly. Last night I did the quick version, but let me run a full check. I watched him slip easily into technician mode, pulling up diagnostics, typing notes with methodical precision. There was something grounding about it, the way he treated the machine with the same gentleness he'd shown me. After a while, he slid the laptop back to me, a neat slip of paper tucked beneath it. Battery contacts cleaned, board reseated, updates installed. Should be solid now. And I'm not charging you for overtime. Just the basics. I frowned, pulling out my wallet. No, do it right. I pay right. He lifted an eyebrow. You're stubborn. Fair. I set the cash on the counter and nudged it toward him. Take it, or I'll find the most ridiculous way to repay you, and you'll regret it. He laughed, finally pocketing the money. All right, stubborn wins. We lingered over the laptop a moment longer, neither of us quite ready to end the morning. He reached for his phone, hesitated, then slid it across the counter toward me. Here, number for when it inevitably crashes again. Or, for when you just want to talk. I typed my number in, handing it back. Same. Though full disclosure, I'm not great at small talk. Good, he said, tucking the phone into his pocket. Neither am I. The simplicity of it made me smile. We sat again, finishing the last of the coffee. The moment stretched until I finally asked, So, what's next? Besides me leaving before you get more customers pounding on the glass. He tilted his head, considering. There's a used bookstore a few blocks from here. They've got mismatched chairs and an old guy who tells you what you should be reading whether you asked or not. And there's a dumpling place right after. How about that? It wasn't a grand declaration, but it was perfect. Low pressure, easy, something that felt like life instead of a movie scene. Bookstore and dumplings, I repeated, grinning. That's dangerously close to a first date. Good, he said again with that small, steady smile. I packed up my laptop, tucking it carefully into my bag. For a moment, I glanced around the shop one last time. The Polaroid wall, the chipped mug, the tools scattered across the bench. It didn't look different than it had the night before, and yet everything had shifted. When I stepped out into the clear morning, the air was fresh. The storm washed away. The town smelled of wet pavement and possibility. And for the first time in a long while, I felt more repaired than the laptop on my back. The days that followed didn't unfold like a movie. They weren't grand gestures or fireworks. Instead, they were small, ordinary things that stitched themselves into something real. It started with texts, short ones at first. A made it home for me after leaving the shop that morning. A customer brought me a laptop filled with glitter somehow. From him in the middle of a Tuesday. They weren't constant, but they were steady. Enough to remind me he was there, that someone thought of me in the middle of the day. Weekends turned into errands. He'd tag along when I went to the farmer's market, carrying my extra bag without being asked. I'd stop by the shop with sandwiches when he was too busy to leave for lunch. We learned each other's rhythms. Not in a rush, not in the dramatic swings I'd once mistaken for passion. Just steady, everyday presence. One Saturday he asked if I wanted to help with the Polaroid wall. It's been falling apart, he said, gesturing at the collage of curling photos. Maybe it's time to add something new. We spread the photos across the counter, carefully pinning them back into place. Blurry dogs, barbecue smoke, half-faded smiles. When the wall was full again, he held out a fresh picture. Us, standing in front of the bookstore, his hand on my shoulder, me holding a paper bag of second-hand novels. "You sure?" I asked, feeling a tug of hesitation. "Feels official." He smiled faintly. "That's the point. We pinned it in the center." Seeing our faces among the rest didn't feel like an intrusion. Felt like balance restored. But it wasn't all easy. My past had a way of sneaking into the quiet. Some evenings I caught myself flinching at how comfortable I felt, as though happiness was a trap waiting to spring. I'd overthink a text I sent, worrying I sounded too needy. Other times, I pulled back altogether, afraid I'd repeat the mistakes that had cost me so much before. He had his own hesitations. Once, when I suggested grabbing dinner after he closed up, he hesitated just a moment too long. "I don't want you to feel like you're just another appointment," he confessed. "I'm afraid of mixing work and us." We bumped up against those fears one evening, a near argument over nothing. A misread tone in a text, a silence that lasted too long. My chest tightened, the old instinct to retreat tugging hard. But instead of letting me run, he sat me down in the back of the shop, tea steaming between us, and said quietly, "Tell me what's really going on." The words cracked something open. I told him about my fear of being swallowed whole by someone else's life again, about how part of me still expected to be left behind. He listened without interruption, nodding only when I paused to catch my breath. Then he shared his side, how running a shop alone made him guard his independence fiercely, how he worried about losing himself in someone else's orbit. We didn't fix it in a single conversation, but the honesty softened the edges. The near argument became a deeper understanding. That night, lying on his couch under the same blanket as before, I thought about the difference between being rescued and being met halfway. With him, I wasn't being pulled out of the wreckage of my past. I was walking forward with someone who matched my steps. Weeks turned into a rhythm. We didn't call each other boyfriends, but we didn't hide what was happening either. When the diner waitress teased him about always ordering 2 coffees to go instead of 1, he didn't flinch. When my neighbor asked who the guy fixing my leaky sink was, I didn't stumble over the answer. We weren't a rebound. We weren't a secret. We were something slow, honest, and warm, like the glow of the shop lamp at midnight, steady and unpretentious. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was vanishing inside someone else's story. I was building one piece by piece alongside him. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of ordinary day that doesn't announce itself, the kind of day you forget unless something small and quiet makes it unforgettable. I dropped by the shop after work, more out of habit than need. My laptop had been working perfectly since that first repair, humming along without complaint. But when I slid it onto the counter that day, he smirked like he'd been waiting for me. "Mind if I check something?" he asked, already reaching for his tools. "You don't trust your own work?" I teased. He shrugged, playing coy. "Just humor me." I watched him unscrew the back panel, nimble fingers moving with a confidence I'd grown to know well. A moment later, he snapped it back into place, slid the laptop across, and grinned. All set. I opened it, puzzled. Everything looked the same, until I noticed a little text document open on the screen. For words, typed in his steady, unhurried style. "You deserve things that work." My throat tightened. For weeks I'd ignored the sticky trackpad, the occasional flicker in the screen, the minor quirks I'd learned to live with. Things that weren't broken enough to demand attention, but broken enough to make life harder in tiny ways. He hadn't just fixed the obvious problem. He'd noticed the small ones too, the ones I didn't believe were worth bothering anyone with. I looked up, heart pounding for no reason other than the sheer tenderness of it. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he interrupted, his smile softer now. "Because you deserve more than half-working things. More than half-working people." I couldn't speak for a moment. So instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out what I'd brought. A framed photo of the shop at dusk, neon sign glowing, rain puddles reflecting the light. Beneath the picture, in my own shaky handwriting, I'd scrawled, "So do you." For a second, he just stared at it. Then he laughed. A real, unguarded laugh that filled the little shop. He set the frame on the shelf beside the Polaroid wall, where our bookstore photo still hung. "Guess we're both guilty of grand gestures," he said, voice rougher than before. "Soft ones," I corrected. "The best kind." That week, the neighborhood seemed to notice the shift between us two. One afternoon, while I was wiping down the counter for him, the florist from next door poked her head in. She gave me a curious smile, then turned to him. "Place feels lighter lately," she said. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up." He glanced at me, his expression equal parts sheepish and proud. After she left, we both laughed, the kind of laugh that comes when you realize you're not hiding anymore. Not from others and not from yourselves. It wasn't long before we started planning a trip. Nothing big, nothing flashy, just a weekend out of town. A drive to a neighboring city with a used record shop he loved and a bakery I'd been dying to try. The idea of it thrilled me, not because it was far, but because it was forward. A small, deliberate step into something beyond cozy nights in the shop and familiar routines. As we mapped the route one evening, I caught sight of the shop door, locked as always after hours. I thought back to that first night, the sound of the latch clicking, the way fear had coiled tight in my stomach. I remembered scanning for the key, reminding myself I could leave if I had to. Now, the lock meant something else. Not confinement, not danger, just safety. A choice. A door closed to the noise outside so something real could grow inside. That realization lodged deep in my chest, quiet and profound. I don't pretend that moving here solved everything. My life is still messy in places. My past still lingers in shadows I sometimes trip over. But I see now that I didn't come here to fix my life in one sweep. I came to build something steadier, one careful piece at a time. And what I found, against all my hesitation, was someone willing to meet me there. Someone who listens, who checks in, who fixes the small things without being asked. Not just in laptops, but in the places I didn't think deserved care. He didn't rescue me. He didn't rewrite my story for me. He simply chose to stay. As I walked out of the shop that night, the framed photo of dusk on the shelf behind us, our bookstore picture smiling from the Polaroid wall, I thought about how beginnings rarely look like we expect. Sometimes they look like a flickering neon sign, a locked door, and a stranger with kind eyes. And sometimes, if you let them, they become home. I tightened my grip on the strap of my bag, my repaired laptop humming softly inside, and let the thoughts settle into words I'd carry with me always. I came in for a repair, hesitant and half-broken. I walked out with something steady, simple, and new. Someone who turned a closed door into a beginning.